you are in the world, and welcome to Frank on Camnet. And I pray that you're keeping, safe. What do we have on the show, today? Today, I've decided to feature a social problem: alcoholism. The WHO says 70% of men and 39% of women in Zambia consume alcohol. Sadly, some of them have gone on to be addicts. One of these is my guest today, Daniel Mbazima, who is a recovered addict. On the brighter side, Daniel is addiction recovery coach and mental health advocate. Good evening, Daniel, and welcome. Pleasure, that you could accept my invitation. I pray that you're keeping safe.
Yeah, I definitely am, and I'm glad to be here. Good evening, sir.
Excellent. All right, first of all, I think just give us a brief as to who Daniel is.
Well, Daniel Mbazima happens to be the firstborn child of a pastor. So you know what they say about pastors.
I know.
Yeah.
I am a son of a Reverend, as you know.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
My father started there. He was one of the founders of United Church of Zambia.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I happen to be the firstborn child, and I have 3 beautiful sisters.
Right.
My mom has also been involved in missionary work, and I grew up in a stable home. Yeah.
Excellent. All right, we'll be getting into that. We're looking at alcoholism and addiction. How do you separate the two? Okay,
so basically, alcoholism is an addiction to alcohol. Okay, so we have different forms of addiction to different things. For instance, we have an addiction to, we can say porn, an addiction to sex, an addiction to different things, an addiction to social media as well. Yeah. But in terms of addiction to alcohol, it is classified as alcoholism. So simply put, a person with alcoholism, such as a person like I, cannot control the intake of alcohol. So what happens to be fun for others is a bit deadly to people like me. Yeah.
Tell me, before we get to how you started, drinking, I did, make reference to brief statistics, that. But what is the bigger picture in Zambia, right now?
Well, as of now, we have a lot of alcoholics, and we have a lot of people who are abusing alcohol. And the sad thing is, these people do not know that they are in such a situation. And right now, I would say the ignorance against alcoholism, as well as the stigma against alcoholism, is very, very high. Because as it stands right now, a lot of people perceive it to be a personal weakness or a choice. So people do not really know about alcoholism. Yeah.
Let's talk about the groups, in society, that are badly affected. Run us through this.
Okay, so when it comes to alcoholism, let me just go back to a brief so that people do not misunderstand me. Actually, there are 3 types of people that drink. Okay, so we have the first class; those are the social drinkers. So these are the people that will come back from work and have maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 beers, and if they have work the following morning, they'll choose not to drink. These are the people that can go to the bar and sit and watch a soccer match over water or over a drink. And these are people who know to say, I have had this much, and that's pretty much enough. So for these guys, everything seems to fall in place, okay? It does not necessarily affect them, but then because it is a chemical substance that they are taking in that moment, from time to time they do get drunk. But when they get drunk, it's the normal, he's just drunk, maybe he's dancing too much, he's talking a bit too much, but it's not anything out of the ordinary, okay? So these are the first class of people that can control alcohol. We have the second class. These are people known as alcohol abusers. So these are people who tend to drink due to, I would say, socioeconomic factors, because they have less opportunities and then they do away with stress. So these are people that are abusing alcohol. An example I would say would be the cowboys, to some extent the street kids, although they usually take to stronger stuff. So these are people who are caught up in certain situations, they lack opportunities, and as a result they drink. Okay, and then after that we have the alcoholics. That's the third class. That's where I fall under. So for a person like me, simply put, when I drink, I'm not like the social drinker. I'm not like a person who abuses alcohol. For a person like me, when I drink, it affects my family. It affects my relationship with everybody else. It affects my reputation. It affects what I'm doing at that time. Is it school? Is it work? It affects my health. It affects my finances. It affects all these things around me. So that's where the border comes in between those that abuse alcohol and the alcoholics and the social drinkers. So we have three classes. So coming to the question that you asked me, Ambassador, about who exactly is affected. It's a society as a general. Yeah, because we are looking at people that are affected, and the disease of alcoholism does not segregate. It doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor, whether you're black or white, whatever race it is, whatever region, whatever social class. A lot of people are battling with alcoholism. Even people in various fields. You have people in education, people in medicine as well. You have people in the army. Everybody else is battling with this thing. Yeah.
Tell me, the million-question question, how does one develop from being a social drinker, you know, to an abuser, to an alcoholic?
Okay, so initially it starts for fun. Okay, I personally started drinking out of curiosity. Okay, for other people it's because of peer pressure, but the truth is, while you're drinking, because of the social interaction and because it's culturally and customarily accepted around here, people sort of tend to use it for anything. We are coming from a culture, Ambassador, where we drink towards anything. Soccer matches, weddings, birthday parties, funerals, everywhere there is alcohol. Alcohol is basically the definition of having a good time and relaxing. A lot of people have a stressful weekend and you ask them what's for the weekend. I'll go out and I'll drink. And most of these things involve alcohol. So we have parents who go home and they won't go home first. They would rather hang out with their peers and hang out over a drink. People are having business meetings over a drink. So because of that, we have sort of accepted alcohol as something that's, you know, normal. And then when people get into it and they begin to drink, they do not look at the negative effects of alcohol. So because of that, it sort of gives you a certain feeling. That's the truth. So people tend to go to it whenever they're sad, whenever they're upset. And in doing that, certain people cannot handle their emotions as other people. Remember, Ambassador, what could be less stressful for you could be more stressful for me. So in that moment, when I take to alcohol and then I find the comfort that I perceive to find in that moment, then obviously it becomes a part of me. So these are the habits that become certain characteristics that people carry along with. And in doing that, people unconsciously ruin themselves. And the fact that I think people do not yet know that alcohol is something that's addictive. When we talk about addiction, the first thing people talk about is weed and drugs and everything. We forget the #1 drug, which is alcohol. So in doing that, because it's socially accepted, people end up getting addicted. And then they move from social drinkers to abusers to alcoholics.
Before we talk about the telltale signs, is this hereditary, you know, because perhaps the parents were drinking and, you know, you're susceptible, you know, to that. You know, eventually you could end up drinking?
When it comes to that, there's a huge debate. As it stands, there are people who are debating whether it's a condition or it's a disease, whether it's hereditary or not. But one thing that's been proven for sure is that although it's not yet proven as genes are being passed on, addictive genes, but a number of people who have had, people that have had drinking problems in their family sort of tend to come off that. So it's like you are a bit easier or open to addiction if you've had that in your family. So these are the traits that are there. And from my personal point of view, it is hereditary.
But you said you come from a Christian in a family. You're saying your parents, though they were Christians, they were drinking?
No, my parents were not drinking. That's where the trick comes in. Usually when we talk about genetics and when you talk about heredity in general, a lot of people refer to the immediate parents. That's why I referred to the family in general, because my own uncles also had drinking problems, okay, and these are my immediate. I'm talking about my father's brothers, my mother's brothers, as well as family members. So it came from there. My parents never used to drink, never saw them drinking, and I don't think they have drunk, except my dad maybe a few times, but it wasn't really that excessive. So all these came from family members around, and for most people, we usually confuse. Sometimes you find in a family, the father can drink normally, but then the child has an addiction problem, okay? And sometimes we confuse the two to say, no, because of this, but if you check closely, you check relations, you check with the grandparents, you check with immediate uncles, you will find some trace in there.
How do you tell then, what are the telltale signs that now you're developing from a social drinker to something dangerous?
Okay, so when you are transitioning from a social drinker to an abuser or to an alcoholic, there are 10 questions that easily show that somebody has a problem. And if your answer is yes to 2 or more of these questions, then definitely there is a problem, okay? So in the beginning, does alcohol control or affect your finances? That's number 1. Number 2, is it affecting your reputation first? Number 3, is it affecting your relationship with people around you? The other thing is it affecting your occupation in that moment? Is it school, is it work, or is it anything that you're doing at that moment? The other thing is it affecting your health to some extent, okay? And then the other question is, do you shy away from your drinking? Do you hide it from other people? The 7th question is, are a lot of people complaining about your drinking? Because that's a huge indication. The 8th question is, are you blacking out? Are you vomiting so much? Are you forgetting certain things? Are you getting involved in fights, or are you getting in trouble because of your alcohol? That's an indication. Number 9 is, do you feel guilty when you wake up? Okay, they're usually, normal drinkers don't feel that because they know to say, yeah, I had this and this and I came back like this. But do you feel guilty? Do you feel it's taking up more of your time? And then the 10th question, which is a major indicator, is, are you resorting to inferior environments and inferior companions because of your drinking? Remember, when you are transitioning from normal drinker and from a social drinker, your class sort of changes a little bit, because your peers in that moment will be doing things that are classified as normal in that moment. But while you're transitioning to the people that abuse or to abusing alcohol, you will be found in certain places at certain times, because alcoholism basically controls the places you go, to the people you mingle with, and what you do. So those are major indicators, and from social to an alcohol abuser to an alcoholic.
Is there time lag involved here, when you're transitioning? How long does this take?
Basically, there are differences when it comes to how people consume alcohol. So in the process of consuming alcohol, there are those that are known as binge drinkers. Those are people that will stay away for some time, and then when they start drinking, they go for maybe 2 weeks in a row, and then they'll stay away for some time. So for those, it's a bit different. And then there are people that are like, in my situation, I took to drinking faster. And that took me into denial, and because of that, it's sort of prolonged. So it depends on a person's genetic makeup, I think, because other people are tolerant to alcohol, while others they are not. Yeah.
That's a very important a point you've raised. There are some people who have no problem drinking 10 bottles of Casa or Mosi, 2 bottles of whiskey without any problem. Could you just unravel that again?
Okay, so when it comes to social drinkers, these are people who can drink. And there is a difference between men and women. They say with females, generally because they have high fat, and then with men, a number of hormones and everything and stuff like that, we are all different. So there are certain people who can drink and handle everything pretty well. Like I said, it doesn't affect their finances, it doesn't affect their health, and they can drink like the whole night without them having issues. And these are people who can drink and have a good time, okay? Like I said, from time to time, because it's a chemical substance, they will go off, but it's nothing serious, okay? So because of that, there is really not enough scientific evidence to prove why it's like that. But then it goes back to certain things, such as, why do certain people have diabetes? That's why I always refer to alcoholism as a disease. In cases to do with diabetes, you find that it's sort of a genetic thing as well. And then it's just like alcoholism, it's a behavior thing, because even people with diabetes, type 2 diabetes specifically, will have certain behavioral lifestyles. They'll still go back to eat certain foods that they know are harmful for themselves. So when it comes to that, I think it also goes along with the question that you asked earlier, to say certain people can handle it, while certain people cannot handle it. So it depends on people's makeup.
What is in this chemical? What does this chemical do to the mind and physically?
Okay, so the number one effect why a lot of people tend to drink is because of something I would say called dopamine. Okay, this is something that's found in the brain. Dopamine is basically that feeling you have when you receive money that you didn't expect. Dopamine is that good morning text from your loved one. the text that you really, really appreciate, yeah, because it's not all times that you feel good. Dopamine is that feeling when you receive a promotion, when somebody compliments you. That's the sort of high that people get from alcohol, okay? That's why people are courageous to do certain things, and people sort of open up and become a bit more social, and it makes people feel alive in that moment. But then those are the promises that alcohol gives you, okay? And those are certain things that go on with people that are social drinkers. But then on the other side, one thing that people do not know is that alcohol affects the supply of oxygen to your brain.
Right.
That's the reason why every time you drink, you tend to feel more and more sleepy. Those are part of the negative effects. On the other hand, also, it sort of takes to control your reasoning. And a lot of people focus on the reasoning. That's why the message out there is causes accidents, this and that and everything. Yeah. We forget about the emotional toll that alcohol has on a person, okay? So alcohol basically controls your emotions. That's the reason why for somebody with a drinking problem, whenever they're sad, they take to drinking. Whenever they're upset, they take to drinking. Whenever they're happy, whenever they feel low, it's because it sort of controls the way you feel, and it takes over your emotional aspect. And then we have other indicators such as it affects your sleep, which is something that a lot of people tend to overlook, okay? Another thing is it affects your eating, and that ends up affecting your health. So the effects are a lot. And then also, you tend to go certain chemical and biological changes when you drink, okay? Another thing is for people that usually drink, a lot of vitamins sort of diminish in the body, and then your water intake is not really as it's supposed to be. So we have a lot of physical and chemical changes that take place in the body to a person that's drinking. Another thing is also it accelerates your rate of depression. That means your mental health is greatly and gravely affected by the intake of alcohol.
Can one regulate, how much, alcohol, is going in the blood, in the bloodstream? I say this, because there are some people who say, if you can drink maybe olive oil, you create a base and you slow down the intake of alcohol in the bloodstream.
Yes, there have been such sayings. Unfortunately, though, that happens for people that, personally, I wouldn't find a reason to do that, okay? So that's found with certain people who want to drink and stay up for other reasons, okay? In most cases, I think I've heard that, because I deal with a number of people, I've heard that when it comes to truck drivers, because they want to stay up, or they have another mandate in the morning. So because of that, they will sort of take some sort of oil, not necessarily the olive oil, even natural oil, the same cooking oil that we use. So they'll take that, have a good time. Because of work, they have to be up on the road at 3 because maybe the truck is being monitored, and they'll sort of do that, okay? So which is also dangerous, because now it's a drinking and driving situation. So a number of people do take to that, and it's very, very harmful, actually, because that leads to alcohol poisoning. Yeah.
Let's talk about the potent now. In terms of the strength of the alcohol somebody is taking. Is that important? And if, for example, you're drinking a Mossy with maybe slightly lower volume of alcohol, as against the hard drinks like whiskey, brandy?
Yes, there is a difference when it comes to that. Not to justify beers, because there are certain people that also tend to be alcoholic of beers, okay? That's because they can handle it. And then what alcohol does to you is, at some point, while you're drinking, it's fun, and you still have your job, you still have your income and stuff like that, but then eventually it becomes a gradual process. So most of the people that start off with beer and they develop a drinking problem while they're at the beer stage, while they're at the cider stage, while they're at the wine stage, while they are at the I would say the good alcohol, in quotations, the good alcohol, what that does is slowly, when it begins to affect the things around you, you slowly go to the juntas. So nobody starts off with just the junior, the juntas, and by juntas I mean spirits, by the way, and the small affordable booze that's being sold. So nobody really starts off on that, unless the people that are, sort of affected and whatnot. So there is a difference when it comes to the content. Of course, with the beer, somebody who's been drinking beer for a while would generally develop a beer belly, but then the person who's been taking spirits for some time, it has a toll on their health. They tend to lose a lot of weight. They tend to look a bit dehydrated. So there is a factor when it comes to the components or the type of alcohol.
Why is it that more men are drinking than women, although the gap is now narrowing? Is it an economic issue?
I wouldn't sort of tend to think so, because looking at the state of mental health in our country, men generally do not have a support system, okay? And besides that, you know, women will go through something, will go through a heartbreak, will go through a bad day, but they always have somebody to comfort them. But for us as men, we have a number of things that are still sort of embarrassing to talk about. Something to do with finances, something to do with the heartbreak or love life, something to do with trouble in the family, something to do with things not going well. We easily do not open up to people unless we reach a moment that is really, really bad. That's when people will expose themselves. That's why when it comes to therapy, men do not really want to, or Africans in general, but men usually are in denial. You get what I mean? We have situations where, let's say the family is falling apart, finances are falling apart, the marriage is falling apart, a number of things are falling apart, but somebody will not open up because it's in our male nature, you know, that male masculinity. And then the thing is, when we open up, I will go to a friend and I'll say, this is what I'm going through. The first thing he'll say is, let's have a drink over it, you know. Let's talk about it while having a drink. And that's how it's been for men. We want to sit down and have something. But then the thing is, a lot of people forget that when you're drinking in that moment, what happens is that you'll be drinking to forget the problem. But when you wake up in the morning, the first thing that's going to say good morning to you are your problems. It's even worse. And then the difference is that your problems are stronger while you're weaker. So because of that, it becomes sort of a cycle. And men generally, going to the bar is not an embarrassing thing as compared to women. Okay, so for a female going to the bar every time to sort of free her mind, she will be labeled. Okay, but for a man, it's a normal thing. I mean, you can walk in anytime, you can buy anywhere, you can drink anywhere. It's publicly accepted. So as a result, men sort of tend to drink a bit more.
Let's talk about the physical harm. I know you've made reference to one or two issues. What damage does it do to the body?
Well, the damage is a lot, okay? So for a person who was in my situation, that's an alcoholic, I'm actually lucky to be alive right now. Yeah, because statistics state that for a person who's battled with addiction, who's battled with alcoholism to some extent, it's at the end of the day, if you don't stop drinking, the drinking will stop you. That's how it is. So when we're talking about the physical damage that it starts, let's focus first of what happens in the drinking places, okay? So because of your nature of drinking, you are prone to fights. You are prone to being easily hit on the road because of the lifestyle that you live. You are prone to easily being attacked. Those are the things that happen while you're drinking. But then besides that, when we talk about the physical nature, firstly, your sleep, your health, and your food is affected, okay? So when all these things are taken away from you, that's the reason why alcoholics tend not to drink so much, tend not to eat so much. The eating happens mostly at the drinking places. That's the only time that they get to drink. And because of that, you miss out on a lot of things that your body needs as you grow. And because of that, your physical fitness is affected as well. So you cannot do other things normally that even a child would do. It's like you are diminishing at a faster rate.
Let's talk about the mental side. You know, I understand the majority of mental cases now, especially Chainama, as a result of addiction. Could you run us through that?
Okay, so when a lot of people talk about Chainama, the number one thing that comes in is crazy people. Okay, and when a lot of people talk about Chainama, the number two thing that that comes in people's minds is drugs. Okay, those are the things that people link them up with. We forget that Chainama offers therapy and whatnot, but then one thing that people need to realize is when you talk about Chainama and you're talking about crazy people and you're talking about people who are not who are mentally unstable, the thing is, majority of those cases, over 65% of those cases are related to alcohol. When we talk about alcohol affecting your brain cells, these things are real, okay? These things really, really do happen. And they happen at a different rate depending on people, okay? It doesn't mean just because you're drinking beer, you don't have any chances of going insane due to alcohol, or just because, or it only happens to people that take strong stuff. It depends on a person, like we said earlier. So a lot of people that are battling from alcohol addiction also tend to have mental health illnesses as well. So because of that link, your rate of going down is really, really fast. So besides the physical effects, yes, the things that we see, mostly becomes a mental issue. I'll give you an example, Ambassador. In my situation, after the whole drinking, remember I talked about the physical things that alcohol had taken away from me. Now I was in a position that most alcoholics and most people who battle with addiction reach, okay? So I was in a position where, because of my lifestyle and because of the things that I went through, I sat down and I looked at everybody around me making progress, okay? I'm talking about friends I was supposed to graduate with and people that were younger than me. These are guys who were buying cars, building houses, getting married, going on vacation. All these other things were happening with them while I was just an alcoholic, basically in one lane with no direction at all. So because of that, we are not only talking about alcoholism, but then the depression comes in, okay? So that also is a mental condition and something that you really need to deal with. Now, if you combine these two, it's like, you know, it's like fuel. You're just waiting for a match for it to blow up,
Daniel, at what stage did you realize, now this is it, you're addicted?
Okay, so what happened to me was I reached an extent where I had to get high every 3 hours. So my alcoholism also...
Every 3 hours?
Yes, every 3 hours. It meant if I'm up between 2 and 5, I had a junta. And if you look at most people in the homes, most people who are battling with addiction, they tend to hide alcohol, okay? Because that's what really matters with them. I deal with a number of people that are battling with alcoholism, and they will tell you to say, actually, at a certain point, he doesn't drink out. He doesn't drink out most of the time. He just gets high by himself. And if you check this guy's rooms, you will find some alcohol somewhere. That's because you cannot do with the alcohol. A simple example of alcohol addiction that I would give is, let's say, Ambassador, you're told to take a walk in the desert the whole day, okay? And then you've been walking for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours and everything and stuff. And eventually you've done the whole day. And after walking for the whole day, somebody takes you to a room, and in between there's this glass barrier that you cannot break through. And then on the other side, there's a glass of water, okay? And then somebody's telling you, focus on your family, focus on your career, focus on this and that. Your mind and your body in that moment just needs that water, just even a drop. That's how bad the alcohol addiction becomes. That's how bad the cravings affect a person. So because of that, a lot of people sort of tend to go back to drinking, because we also have an issue to do with the cravings. So basically put, an addict means you cannot live without that thing. Only when you take it, that's when you feel better, okay?
How are you financing your addiction? I mean, alcohol is not cheap in this country.
So when it came to that, earlier on, when you asked me the previous, I forgot to say, I just got tired. That's the answer that I gave. I got so tired to a point where, you know, I had hurt my family and I had embarrassed my family. These are cases that come along with alcohol addiction, okay? So you find that mothers are spending sleepless nights, you know, parents are stressing, there's the shame, the embarrassment, personal relationships are broken between families. Another example I would give is you would have a situation, let's say a father in a family, or the breadwinner, or even a child is involved in an accident, or there's a chronic illness in that family. What that does in that family is that it brings the family together. There's a lot of hope, a lot of love, a lot of faith, a lot of prayer that the person will be okay. But look at a family with an alcoholic. Things are a mess, okay? You don't see eye to eye with your siblings. Parents are fighting, you know, parents are blaming each other, to say enabling the child. There's the shame, there's the embarrassment, and all those things that happen. So when it comes to that, you know, I basically I really just got tired, and then I said, I think it's about time, okay? And because of that, I just said, you know, let me try to seek help.
Did you at certain times feel suicidal?
I did. I actually did feel suicidal, because when you talk about alcoholism, I reached an extent where I'd hurt everybody so much. And because I had tried to get rid of it, and what used to happen is I would go through withdrawals, okay? So basically put a withdrawal is when you try to stay away from something. Let's say you try to stay away from alcohol, and then the first 3 days is usually okay, but then on the 4th day, depending on the person, the 4th, 5th day, that's when you have, you know, compulsive headaches, and you find you have, you know, massive stomach pains, you have constant running diarrhea until you drink. That's one thing that a lot of people ignore. So because of that, I chose to say, you know what, that process is really painful. I think, let me continue drinking just a bit. I think that will help. And that's the position that most alcoholics find themselves in. But then because it's too difficult to open up, because, you know, you've basically been rejected and you've thrown everyone away. So I reached an extent where I thought to say, you know, I've caused my family so much harm and so much pain. And now that's when I understand that sometimes people who commit suicide, it's not because they want to, but it's because I was in a place where I felt like, you know, maybe if I go, everybody else would be happy. They wouldn't have to deal with me. And most of all, I would end the pain myself. So suicide thoughts really, really came through my mind. But there is one time when I had the courage to commit suicide, and that came off after I had overdosed, and I woke up, it was raining. I was saved by the cowboys, the Caponias. Those are the guys who saw me, they picked me up and they put me aside. And like it happens in alcoholism, you sort of tend to be rejected by society because of the traits that somebody goes through. So when that happened to me, you know, people were passing by, they saw me and they already knew me. So it wasn't the first time I was blacking out, they already used. So they say, you know, this guy likes booze, it's going to kill him. And everybody went about with their business. And it was in that moment when I woke up, I was cold, I was hungry, I was shivering, I was wet. I had all these emotions, I was a bit high, I was confused. And a little girl just came to me and she said, you know what, since you want to kill yourself, why don't you just lie on the road and you end it all? And I had thought about suicide many times, but in that moment I had the courage because that looked like the final solution to me. And I contemplated making suicide and committing suicide. And it's in that moment when I was crawling to the bridge, that's when my mom showed up. And she had been looking for me for over 5 months. Yeah. And when I went home, I still battled with addiction for over a year.
You come from a Christian family, the son of a pastor. Did it cross your mind, you know, that you had failed, you know, coming from, you know, a Christian family?
That's one of the things that wore me down. I felt like a failure, and that's one of the things that most alcoholics go through. Okay, when you sit down with a person and you ask them, what is it really? They will tell you, look, I'm trying to get myself back up, and everybody thinks I'm doing this kadalo deliberately, but then the truth is I had failed. Okay, and I did feel like a failure because I was in a position where I was looking at myself and I said, how did I sink so low? And how come I went from this to this real quick? And I knew the state that I was in, but I didn't really know how to get out of it. And quite frankly, I felt like I had really, really failed my parents. And at that moment, I did actually fail my parents.
At what time, at what stage then, did you realize, you know, that you needed help?
Firstly, I had tried to quit drinking by myself, and I tried to quit using substances by myself, and I completely failed. And it was in that moment that I remember one of the conversations that I had with my dad. And I remember that morning he skipped church for me. I've never seen my father skip church in, I don't know, since I was born. But that moment, he had already dressed up, and then he skipped church, and we sat down, the two of us. And, you know, he talked about a lot of things. It was a long conversation, but the thing that stood out to me is when he said, Daniel, you are not the problem. You as a person, you're not the problem. Your problem is the addiction. Your problem is the alcoholism. Those are two different things. You're still that same, you're still my child, you're still that same kid that we love, but then your alcoholism is the problem. And it was in that moment where I looked at it and I said, wow, that's, I think, all that I needed. And for me, that was a wake-up call because I began to look at my life and then I realized to say, alcohol, in my case, was not really my problem. It was my solution. And because of that, I sort of went ahead and consumed it more, and then it brought me to this level. So I realized to say, there's one thing that I usually tell most alcoholics to say, you are here, the alcohol is here, and on top there's financial stability, there's health, you know, there's your relationships, there's your unlimited potential and all these other things. But anything you get, an opportunity goes to the alcoholism and it comes back to you. You get money, alcoholism, it comes back to you. All these things, alcoholism, it comes back to you. So for you to progress, you need to eliminate this because that's what's holding you back. It reached a point that I used to steal to feed my addiction. And it gets to an extent where when you're in that moment, the only thing that matters is you get into the next drink. So anything that's of value will have to go. And anything that belongs to anyone, I didn't really care at that moment. I knew what I was doing, but I had to get drunk. That's how bad it was.
What else did you lose? I mean, your dignity, obviously.
Firstly, I got expelled from 2 medical schools.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how bad it was. And that was in Russia when I went for studies. So a number of people graduated from Russia, a number of friends graduated from Russia. As we are speaking now, I could have been 6 years as a practicing medical doctor. But then that simply shows that besides everything else that I lost my career as well. And I lost a number of friends due to alcoholism.
All right. Let's go through. Before we talk about the recovery program, what were your peers in all this?
My peers were at some point, they were helpful because when you're transitioning, your peers change, okay? So as time goes on, what used to happen is with the guys that I used to drink in the beginning, I sort of stayed away from them because I felt they were talking too much, and that's what happens in alcoholism. Your friends begin to watch out and say, look, I think you're overdoing it you're overdoing this. And in that moment, that's the point where an alcoholic falls in love with the alcohol. That's the most dangerous phase. That's why a number of people are in denial, because at a certain point they fall in love with it because of the euphoric feeling, and because it easily relates to them, and because when they're drinking they're free and they feel like they're in control. So at the moment I was in love with it. So what happened, my friends also stayed away from me because I was bad company, and it was in that moment that I moved to associate with people who were equally abusing alcohol with me in that moment. And during that phase, when people are abusing alcohol, that's the time, that's like the wake-up call. Okay, so most people change during that phase, and some continue to abuse alcohol. But then in that phase also I had to move and now hang out with the alcoholics, the real alcoholics. So my friends were sort of changing. The other guys, the social drinkers and everybody else, thought you come in and talk to me, but because they didn't know how to, I felt they were a bit judgmental, even though they were trying to do whatever they could do. Another thing about alcoholism is it affects the people that love you the most. The reason it affects them the most, and the reason why they suffer the most, is because they are seeing somebody they love turn into somebody they never ever thought they'll become. And they're seeing somebody disappear in their eyes. So because of that, Ambassador, whenever they talk to an alcoholic, there's so much emotion, there's so much pain, there's so much hurt, that it comes off as judgmental and it comes off as condemnation. So because of that, the message does not get across. Because on the other hand, you have the alcoholic who's emotionally, psychologically, and mentally broken.
Did the stigma, impact you?
Yes, it did, a lot. In many moments, I felt like I was not good enough, and I felt like I could not change. That's because people do not understand that alcoholism is a condition, alcoholism is a disease. And the same way that somebody has a hypertension or somebody is suffering from a certain condition, when they go to the hospital and seek medical help, is the same way alcoholism can be treated. To this extent, a number of people do not know that there are actually certain drugs that people can use to reduce the cravings and to detox from alcohol. And for me, that's one thing that I needed. And the problem, another important thing, Ambassador, is we have sort of spiritualized alcoholism. Okay, so besides everybody looking at it as a weakness, we have other people who believe they are demons, and people do get prayed for. And of course, a number of people have been saved from alcoholism using spiritual method, while a number of us also had to go to rehab to get saved from alcoholism, and it is through rehab that we found Christ. And a number of people also have to undergo certain health issues for them to change and switch up. So we all hit rock bottom differently, but it doesn't matter as long as you have eliminated the alcoholism in your life.
Before we talk about your recovery program, I think which is very important to a number of people who are viewing us tonight, I just want to say this thing clear. When you place alcohol in comparison to, say, cocaine, marijuana, because there's so much emphasis on the hard drugs. Where do you place alcohol?
I place it highly above everything else.
Really?
Highly above everything else. Right now, we have something that's called Volo on the streets, which is a very highly addictive drug. That's the one that's, weed is something of the past. So we have heroin and Volo, which is sort of the same thing. And then we have cocaine and everything. But Ambassador, I would tell you, it's surprising to note that, this is why I read alcohol high. It's surprising to note that every 100 meters within any major capital or any major town, you can easily access alcohol. We can take a walk from here, and less than 100 meters we'll find a point where they sell alcohol. That's how bad it is. And right now, alcohol has got a lot of massive advertising. Okay, when we're talking about sports, we're talking about everything else, weddings and stuff like that. Everything that's advertised comes along with alcohol. And then besides that, we have been doing something wrong. We have been telling people and children basically to say, do not take this until the age of 18. So because of that, the first rebellion that kids take to before they even engage in sex or other things is testing alcohol.
Absolutely.
That's how bad it is. So people grow up knowing that I can start taking at 18, and unfortunately by 21 they're already alcoholics. That's how bad it is. And if you look at how many lives have been affected I would place alcohol above everything else. And then when you look at the older people, it's not the older people that are taking to cocaine. No, they're taking to alcohol. This is something that's really, really dissolving marriages, affecting workplaces and everything. So I would rate alcohol as number one above everything else.
Other business in houses, that make alcohol, plus advertising, agencies, exacerbating the problem. Or let me put it this way: there is a fine line, between now this as a problem and the economic returns of the country. How do you balance the two?
I think as it stands, we have not really paid an attention to alcoholism, and we look at the economic benefits as a country. And I think because of that, that's why our policies are sort of weak. That's why our message and our awareness on alcohol is sort of weak, because of the economic benefit that it has. And quite frankly, these guys are in it for the business, so they definitely will advertise as much as they will. And it's because of this proper, planned, and massive and interesting advertising and marketing. That's why all these companies have a upper hand, okay? Because there are very few people speaking about speaking against it, while there are a lot of people promoting it. When you talk to children about alcohol, and they will tell you the number one thing it causes accidents is not a lot of people that drive, okay? And for them, they feel, if I don't drive, well, I can drink. And right now, I feel the message should stop from beer is bad, this and that. We should focus on teaching refusal skills to children.
Yeah. I know this is a hypothetical, question. I mean, obviously, some of these, business houses are contributing, to alcoholism, addiction. Should there be a situation where, if I become an addict, I can maybe think of taking legal recourse against some of these companies?
Well, our policies are generally weak, Ambassador, because the first thing that we need to do is first strengthen the policies. For instance, we don't have very strict laws as far as the age of 18 is concerned. Right now, that is not applicable. Secondly, almost every shop that you walk into sells alcohol. So I don't really know when it comes to the licensing. I don't know if it's bars or shops or anything. Where you walk in the shop right now, it's like alcohol is like salt, like millimil. You find it everywhere. And then we need to have on-premises and off-premises spots where alcohol is sold. And besides that, the prices should be changed. These are things that are easily affordable and easily accessible. So those are things that we should consider. Yes, of course, we have to put into consideration social drinkers and the fact that there is an economic benefit as far as alcoholism is concerned, but then let's look at the lives that have been ruined. We have sort of let this, we have ignored alcoholism for some time to a point where it's just a choice. And because of that, we sort of ignore the impact that it has on everybody else. So yes, companies are generally contributing, and the reason they are contributing is because we have allowed them to. And the policies in place do not really limit them towards certain things.
I may return to that economic issue, hopefully, towards the end of the program. We still haven't dealt with your recovery program. How long did it take? What did you go through? I mean, we hear stories about really the effects, the withdrawal symptoms, which can be deadly. What did you go through?
Well, for me, I reached an extent where I said, and this is the point that I emphasize on, I reached an extent where I got tired. So it has to take the alcoholic themselves. I know there are a number of people that are doing what I'm doing, and I always tell parents to say, I can lead and guide this person, but then it has to come from them. So once you give in when it comes to alcoholism, everything else becomes easier. In the rest to do with alcoholism, the thing is you have to surrender to win, because when you surrender, it means you don't have to fight anymore. That's just how it is. And when it comes to alcoholism, you have to identify the fact that you have a problem. Okay, and of course there are repercussions that happen through, but then you have to be very honest with yourself. So in my case, I had to openly agree to say, yes, I have a problem. And then I had to put myself in the hands of people that knew how to do it. Okay, so those were people who knew how to handle medication as far as alcoholism is concerned, the professionals in alcoholism. Of course, it was a bit different for me, because I was having sleepless nights, and I had to readjust with my diet, and I had to readjust with my comfort, my self-esteem. I wouldn't easily walk to the mall because I felt like everybody was too judgmental and everybody was looking at me. I had to get back and adjust adjusting everything. But the truth is, Ambassador, I lost so many years to alcoholism, and it took me only 4 months to get over everything. That's how it was. So I was willing to fight and say, look, I have tried my way. This is where alcoholism addiction got me. Now let me try recovery. So it's not really a long process, as many say it. As long as one is willing and they're given, it makes everything easier. That's the starting point.
What is the program? What does it involve?
Okay, well, for me, I had to go to rehab, and at the time, there were no stable rehabs in the country. But then another thing is I also work with people towards alcoholism and achieving and overcoming addiction, okay? So there are a number of tricks that a person can use to be sober. One of the most important thing, Ambassador, is I love watches, by the way. I have a huge collection of watches.
Okay.
When I was in rehab, a man came to me and he said, you've been, how long have you been getting high? So I said, for me, it's mostly 3 hours. And if I'm up, I would go home maybe at midnight. Early in the morning, I would leave. And the first thing I would go for was alcohol. I would stay drinking the whole day and using other substances the whole day. So he told me, how long have you tried to stay sober? So I said, I think the most I did was 6 hours. And then he asked me how. I said, I don't know. I've just been trying. Then he asked me to say, in your initial stages, before you came to rehab, how was it? So I said I would go for maybe a week or two, and then I would go back. And then he told me, you're making one mistake. The thing is, the biggest mistake that most alcoholics make is they say, this year, I'm not going to drink. If you look at the people that had drinking issues in December, and then you ask them how far with your drinking, they're probably into drinking now, and it's become worse, okay? So a lot of people say, I won't drink for a month, then that's it. I won't drink for a week, then that's it. I won't do this for a weekend, then that's it. I'm done. I'm quitting right now, right here and then. But one of the most important secrets for me was, and I always tell people to stay sober 24 hours at a time. And you break those 24 hours to 1 hour at a time. So what you have to do is you just stay sober for 1 hour. And you're taking note of the fact that alcoholism controls the places you go to, the people you mingle with, and what you do. So you have to change the people you mingle with, because in most cases when it comes to alcoholism, you'll be surrounded by people who continue drinking. So you're in a position where you're saying yes to everybody and everything alcoholism and everything alcoholic, but saying no to yourself as a person. So you have to turn that around. When it comes to the places that you go to, you do not put yourself in compromising situations. As much as alcohol is everywhere, I wouldn't personally go and hang out when I know there's booze around, unless it's maybe a funeral or a wedding, or maybe these birthday parties that you cannot avoid. But even there, in the presence of alcohol, I won't stay for long, because I know where I'm coming from, and I know it's fun for others, but it's deadly for me. And then the things you do, things have to change as well. You cannot automatically live your life a different way while having an alcoholic state of mind, because you still go back. So I had to change all that. And I just tried staying sober for like an hour, and I would break that down in 30 minutes. I'd maybe watch a movie, read, take a walk, maybe start working out. I would do my bed, make my own breakfast. And when I continued like that, Ambassador, I would find I've done an hour. And then I do that the other hour, just like that, bit by bit, just changing things around and everything. Eventually, I've done 3 hours, and I would add another hour just like that. Eventually, I'm into 6 hours, I'm into 8, I'm into 12, I'm into 16, 18, I've done 24 hours. I repeat the same thing the following day. Just like that, I've done 48 hours, 72 hours, and then the hours turn into days, the days turn into weeks, the weeks turn into months, and eventually I'm here, heading to 4 years sober on the 19th of July.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. What have been the positives?
The positives are that after getting expelled from 2 universities, I'm back in school now. I'm in my final year. And besides that, I reconnected with my family. I have a great relationship with them, as well as people that I hurt. And the positives are that I'm helping other people as well, to mostly the young people, to avoid certain mistakes that I made. And I'm also helping people get back on their feet.
Brilliant. Tell us about some of these 2 roles I made reference to, recovery coach and mental health advocate.
Okay, so when it comes to recovery coach, I basically help people who are battling with what I'm battling with. Even when it comes to church, Ambassador, one thing that keeps people in church are people's testimonies. So in most cases, it has an effect to some extent, especially for those that have tried other means. When they hear from a fellow alcoholic, they sort of tend to understand, because things are easily relatable. And then I'm talking about things that I've battled with, and I sort of act as an example for other people to see and say, okay, he did it, and let me do it this way. And people can easily reach out. So because of that, I also guide people. And another thing that is really missing with a number of people is I like to do I like to do outdoor activities with people. It's not all the time that I'll be talking about alcoholism or addiction and this and that and everything. I become this guy's friend, because in most cases when you're transitioning from your life, you're sort of partying with everybody that you've known for years and habits that you've done for years. And because of that, it becomes lonely. Recovery is somewhat sort of a lonely but a strength journey as well. So people are not usually prepared to change their friends and change their surroundings and everything and stand up on their own. That's where I come in and act as a recovery coach to help guide people through. If somebody wants us to go back to school, in my situation, it's a bit easier because I went back to school. So they will be asking me to say, how do you handle going back to school at a certain age and being the oldest guy in class? How do you handle going back to a school environment and being expelled or quitting school halfway? So I come in to guide them through. If people want to join businesses and whatnot, I lead them to other people that, you know, can connect them. That's as far as recovery is concerned. Now, when it comes to mental health, Ambassador, I'm very passionate about it because in my work with addiction and alcoholism, I looked at something that was really, really close, and I picked up to mental health. My reason is this, Ambassador. Growing up, we know what to do, okay, when we injure ourselves. Everybody knows about CPR and all these other things and everything. But then, Ambassador, as you grow, what happens is the physical injuries reduce because you know how to avoid them. But then the emotional and the mental injuries increase. I'm talking about injuries such as feeling low, being rejected, being sad, okay, being disappointed, failure. All these things happen, and then people do not really know how to handle them because these are things that were never taught, okay? So because of that, I took a particular interest to mental health, and it's been overwhelming. It helped me become a bit nobody's fully stable, but it helped me know how to handle my emotions and identify my triggers, so I know what to do when I'm sad, I know what to do when I'm upset. By the way, I'm still recovering, okay? So just because I've stayed for some years without drinking means I'm still prone to drink. And if I start, for me, it's down the hill to where I'm from. So I need to come in and watch my mental health, watch how I feel, watch how I think, and watch how I do things so that I protect myself from alcoholism. So that's where my passion from mental health advocate as well as recovery coach comes from.
Before we take a short break, are there some testimonies, some experiences, you know, that you've read about, or you've gone through that really broke you? That this is bad. It's hit me really bad.
A number of them have really happened to me because I come from a place where I've seen most of my friends pass on because of alcoholism. And I also come from a place where I will, for instance, one of the very first guys that I talked to in recovery some 4 years plus ago, the guy went back to school and he will be graduating as a medical doctor this year. So he went on to finish something that I failed to finish. And then I also love the connection that I have with people. But however, what breaks my heart, Ambassador, is when you're trying to reach out to the person and then they cannot see it, and then they're comfortable with living a life like that. And then it breaks my heart because I'm doing everything I can to sort of guide the person to recovery, and then, you know, the parents are there and everybody's supportive, but the person just says, this is my lifestyle. And unfortunately, you tend to lose people, and then it's just a phone call that comes to you and says, oh, you did your best, but this person is gone.
One quick question again before we open. I mean, we're told when you're going through this problem, and friends, family members tell you, you know what, if you continue along this path, you're going to die. But we still don't listen. How do you explain that?
People are in denial. Okay, people are in denial. Life is between pain and pleasure. But if that pleasure is at the tip of your hands, and if that pleasure is all in a drink, then it's very difficult when you're doing something that you love and something that takes away your pain. So as a result, mostly it also comes with the family members. So we have two types of family members. We have those that condemn too much because they do not understand the severity of the situation, and, you know, they basically look down on the person. Ambassador, I'll give you an example. One thing that most people forget when it comes to treating alcoholics is that when you're at work and you have a bunch of people that are talking bad about you, you will stay away from them. Even in church, Ambassador, when you have people that are talking negative about you, you will stay away from them. So this is what happens when it comes to alcoholics, because the family is talking constantly about the person. They would rather stay away and not listen to them because it's some sort of rebellion that the family perceives, and they do not perceive it as a problem or as a disease. So because of that, they really do not know how to help a person. And then on the other hand, while we have the people that condemn when it comes to family members, we have enablers, okay? These are people who say, you know, he's going to change, and then some people are still sort of protecting the child, and some people are still sort of, you know, giving some sort of help and doing all these other things to sort of unconsciously enable the child to continue. So as a result of that, people do not really hit rock bottom fast, and then they feel that their behavior is a bit tolerable, and because of that they continue. And another thing that make people be in denial is the fact that they see these things everywhere.
Absolutely.
And then they feel like, maybe if I change from spirits to beer, I'll be a bit better. But at the end of the day, they'll change to beer, but they'll still get drunk. Maybe if I change to wine, I'll get better. And because of that, it's a non-sequitur, because help is there, but people do not know where to get it.
Brilliant. This is Frank On Camnet. I'm really enjoying this. You know, my guest this evening, you know, Daniel Mbazima, who is a recovered or recovering, you know, addict. We'll take a short break, and if I've left out some questions, I'm sure I have. You know, this is your turn now to ask, you know, Duncan some questions. You can call us, or you can send, you know, some messages. Join me and my guest after this break.
Lukalu, all the way from South Africa. You are watching Camnet channel, not just another channel. God bless you. Stay tuned.
Welcome back. You know, this is Frank On Camnet. Wherever you are in the world, you know, I'm talking to you know, Daniel Mbazima, who is a recovering, you know, addict, you know, from alcohol. If you've got any questions, you know, please, you know, don't hesitate to call us, you know, now. Or if you've got any messages, you know, please, you know, do that. You know, before we, you know, we pick up, you know, a call or a message. Alcohol Anonymous, an organization for those who want, you know, to get help. You know, how do they access this, and how confidential, you know, is, you know, the treatment, the management of addicts?
Okay, well, when it comes to Alcoholics Anonymous, this is a team of people that have battled with issues to do with alcoholism, and it has a lot of confidentiality with it. There is a Facebook page that people can easily inbox, and people can get back to them. Because of the COVID, physical meetings are not really in place, but there definitely are people that are there to help you. So when it comes to Alcoholics Anonymous, these are people who have battled with addiction to do with alcohol and other substances as well, and they have a...
You just made reference to COVID. By the way, if you want to call us, you know, please, you know, do that. You've just made reference to COVID. Has this had an impact, you know, in terms of increasing the numbers of those who are turning to the bottle?
Yes, it has, because this is the period that we've never ever seen before. This is a period where a number of people were facing economic challenges, and because of that, stress and stresses were generally high.
Yeah.
So as a result of that, a lot of people began to take to the bottle a bit more. And also, I don't know if it's a good thing, but this is the time that parents for once sat back and noticed the issues that their children were going through. I had a number of people reaching out to me during the COVID period, because that's when they noticed, that's when they stayed home to notice that, oh, my child has been drinking excessively because they've never been there. So as a result, there has been a lot of increase in people using alcohol.
I'm talking to Daniel Mbazima, he's a recovering, addict. We're talking about, alcoholism. If you'd like, to call us, please, do that. Do we have any messages, from anybody, would like to raise any issues on our program today? Please help me connect to that guy. I've started a drug-related NGO. Maybe we can work together. That's great. Any more messages? Do we have any more messages? Let's deal with that without Daniel. How? Good evening. Good topic. How come some alcohol drinkers and tobacco smokers are able to moderate their drinking and smoking, while others fail to do so? Let's deal with those two issues.
Okay, for those that are trying to reach me, my name is Daniel Mbazima on Facebook. You can simply inbox me, and then we can get to talk about it. Yeah, and for certain people, like we said in the beginning,
tobacco.
Yes, it's very different. Okay, so when it comes to tobacco smokers, I don't really feel there's a way to regulate tobacco, because I'm glad that that message came through. Tobacco is one of the things that go hand in hand with alcohol. These are things that are generally accepted, okay? So a lot of people tend to stop smoking harder stuff, and they tend to fall back to tobacco, which we have ignored, and which is also highly addictive. The reason tobacco smoking in any form is highly addictive because it's generally acceptable. It's like, oh yeah, I mean, he's just doing it for fun. But then the usage sort of increases, and because of that, it puts you in a position to be vulnerable to a number of diseases. That's one thing that a lot of people ignore. So I would say there is a difference in terms of tolerance as far as alcohol is concerned, but I do not personally think there's a difference in tolerance as far as tobacco is concerned.
Those of you who would like to call us, please, if you want to raise, we got somebody on the line. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir. Your name, please?
Hello, Sinkala from Chingola.
Yes, Mr. Sinkala, what is the issue you want to raise with my guest this evening?
I'm very, very happy to hear what Daniel was saying concerning alcoholism. I can just doing the same thing, because the topic is educating a lot of people, especially in our country, Zambia. People are getting too much alcohol as a result. They are failing to support their families. That's what I can contribute to the issue, what is happening to the topic and in short.
Brilliant.
Thank you, Frankie.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sinkala. We did talk about hereditary. I mean, there's the flip side of that also, that certain tribes may drink more than the other tribe. Is this just a myth, or there's some truth in that?
It is true. It is true. Yeah.
Reason?
I think it goes back to customary and culturally acceptability. A lot of people tend to alcohol because of certain celebrations, and it's something that has been there for some time. Actually, when you go back to alcoholism, it's a disease that's been there. It's one of the oldest diseases, So all along, even our forefathers took on it as something that, is part of their culture. And in some places, drinking is celebrated. So unfortunately, I think it's now that people are opening up and saying, there is something that we've been missing out.
We've seen some stories on social media where some parents, especially young parents, actually give children alcohol. What would you be telling them?
Firstly, that comes because a number of people, and because I deal with such issues, a number of people tell me when you make a child taste alcohol, they will sort of resist and stay away from the test. That's the myth that's been there. But then as a child is growing, people forget that from the time that the child is growing, let's say up to grade 7, when they go into grade 8, you are no longer fully in control of the child, because now their decisions are influenced by their peers. So if they get into an environment where the peers sort of drain them into alcohol, it becomes a bit easier for them to follow through. So one thing I always tell parents is that let the whole addiction alcoholism talk start in our families. Let's talk to our children before the drug dealers, before the people that sell alcohol do. And it's very important for families to sit down and say, look, this is coming from so and so. Your uncle had an issue to do with alcohol. Therefore, you are not in a position to control this thing.
Can I call like, good evening?
Good evening.
Your name?
How are you, sir?
I'm fine, sir. Your name, sir?
Maxwell Coleman.
Where are you calling from? Yes, Maxwell, what is your contribution this evening?
In the first place, I want a point of correction to the gentleman on the program.
Yeah.
I don't know whether it is the son to Charles Mazina.
Yes, sir, that's my father.
Okay. I will be Charles Mazina, my fellow boy. And point of correction, because you said your parents never drank, Charles Mazina used to drink. And when he was waiting for the brewery for his father, he used to drink a lot. But the other time I went to meet him at national meeting, he was a very changed man. He was such a person that I knew at National Volleyball and the volleyballer at Zambia Brewery. He really encouraged me to get into the church, I think, Deeper Life. And I got into Deeper Life, and I appreciate that even the way you speak yourself, you are a sign of the pastor, really.
Thank you.
So I appreciate the views that you communicated to alcoholism. I just pray that you keep it up and encourage a lot of youth to abstain from alcohol.
Thank you very much.
Brilliant, great and a contribution that must be very encouraging.
Yes.
Have you made, you've given up on the old friends? New friends now?
I'm still in touch.
What are old friends saying?
I'm still in touch with them. Firstly, just to respond to that, thank you so very much for that contribution, as well as everyone who's called and texted.
Yeah.
I said I never saw my father drink.
That's what I'm saying.
Really,
but you agree that the other family members were?
The other family members, And I do get to meet my friends, and for some, it's an amazing sight because they also drop the bottle. But unfortunately, for many, it's a sad sight because I'm basically seeing them go, and you can tell the step they head into. Because when it comes to alcoholism, if you have a drinking problem, there is no such thing as a completely recovered alcoholic. And you find most of my friends will stop, but then they will relapse. And I personally do everything I can, but then it's sad that I can help out. And alcoholism takes you to only 3 places, like they say. It's either the hospital because you will get sick, jail because you'll be stealing to feed your addiction, or you will be in trouble because of your addiction, and the mortuary. And all 3 places you cannot drink while you stop. So for some, it's great. It's a 50-50 situation.
I know. We know. I've lost people who I know very well. Let's pick up in a caller. Good evening. Good evening. Your name, please.
From Kaoma.
How is Kaoma this evening?
Yes, please, I just wanted to contribute to the program. That's the program.
Please.
I enjoy it.
Go ahead.
Now, the thing is that we have to listen and can discuss that. You can say, the place where talking alcohol is to go for the night. But me, I have been and so on. But after going for 3 days, I didn't fasting. After the fasting, I'm completely. I'm thinking like anything like drinking or smoking and so on. So I
you. Basically, how do you enhance this will? You know, I mean, there are a lot of people who decide without any problem that they can only drink over the weekend. If you can stop during the week, surely you can even stop, you know, during the weekend. My question is, how can you enhance this will and even stay away from more than a weekend?
Well, it depends on the person, and it depends on what the person is going through.
Yeah.
But most of all, willpower is really, really important.
Yeah.
One of the things that I always tell people is just look at it. And for somebody who's going through a phase where the drinking is affecting them and they failing to accept it, I always tell them, look, you can lie to me, you can lie to everybody else that you don't have a drinking problem, but look at your drinking record. And for once, just be honest. Once you're honest with yourself, that's when you begin to look at areas such as identifying triggers that take you back to drinking. That's how you keep enhancing the will. That's when you sort of tend to do away with certain friends that you know can take you back to drinking. That's how you enhance the will. That's when you use your smartphone to reach out and read more about alcoholism. There's a lot of content on the internet about it. So it's just a daily thing, and you just try to stay sober in the moment, just one day at a time. That's all it takes.
Yeah, that, you know, abroad, you know, there was a time I saw these ads, really frightening ads, where they show you, you know, the damage, you know, said to the liver. Does that help? That kind of fright?
It sort of does. It sort of does to some extent. Okay, for certain people, when they look at them, it sort of brings some sort of reaction, and then they do not want to go there. But to some people, depending on the level of alcoholism that they're on, especially if they fall in love with alcohol at the moment, it's a bit difficult. But the best way to go about it, Ambassador, is through therapy. Therapy always works out as far as alcoholism is concerned. So one of the biggest mistakes is people focus on telling the person, look, this and this is going to happen to you when you're drinking, you're going to die, you're going to this, you're going to this. But instead of looking at what is going to happen to the person, let's focus on what is missing. What is making the person drink? When we focus on that, only then can we address the situation, because alcoholism cases are different.
Brilliant. Let me pick up another inner caller. Good evening.
Good evening.
Evening, your name, please?
I'm John Mbakoni from Ndola.
I was in Ndola this evening.
It's fine and we're cool.
Excellent. What is your contribution, sir?
Yeah, I was just thinking about when you look at alcohol, in some other countries like Netherlands, they call it, where they say, when you take a beer, you become more excited.
Right.
And you can be able to communicate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then I was also looking at the diversification its impact on a beer. Yeah, I like the way it has come out. Because sometimes in Zambia, people take a beer out of where when they have a problem, that's when they're able to solve a problem. Could you kindly comment on that?
All right. Let's see. Let's see if we can pick up some messages also. Then you can deal with that. Questions. Do we have some messages on the screen that we can deal with? Hi guys, thank you so much for bringing this topic. I've really learned a lot, and it has changed the way I think and see alcoholism. Anything else on the screen? This topic is very beneficial to us, even though I don't drink. Brother Daniel, kudos to you. And Ambassador, I have a sibling that drinks. How do I help? Daniel? And plus the other question.
Okay, so when it comes to people drinking to sort out problems, that's just a perception that alcohol gives, okay? It's the same perception that a lot of people take to say, when I smoke weed, I'll become a bit smarter, okay? Or when I smoke weed, this and that happens. The truth is, it may happen temporarily in that moment, but that's according to your imagination and according to how you feel, and because of the euphoria and the dopamine. But like I said earlier, whenever you drink to sort out a problem, when you wake up in the morning, the first thing that says good morning to you are those problems. And they are stronger and you are weaker because you have added more time to it and you have not really addressed it as it is. And if you are going through a certain problem, the best way to address it is in a sober state of mind. I have never really met anyone who has discovered something out of being in a drunk state. That does not really happen unless otherwise. And to the message that came in for somebody who's seeking help. The name is Daniel Simbazima. You can simply inbox me on Facebook. I will be more than willing to respond. And for now, the most important thing is when you're talking to the person that has an alcohol problem, you have to be certainly sure to say, this is an alcohol problem, okay? So the same way you would talk to a partner, let's say in marriage, the same way you talk to a colleague when you have a misunderstanding is the same way that you would talk to somebody who's dealing with an alcohol problem. That's the same way that you talk to them, and then you open their eyes to say, look, you exactly are not really the problem, but then the problem is your addiction, the problem is your alcoholism. And then you open their eyes slowly to let them see what alcoholism is doing to them. And then the most important thing, Ambassador, is usually when we talk to people, people always come off as defensive. So because you are in a position where you're seeing your loved one with a drinking problem, you need to realize that it's not about you.
Right.
It's not about what you've done, every method that you've done to get them help and everything. That does not really matter. It's about them because they are sick, you are not. So in that conversation, make sure you listen. The problem is we usually cut people short to say, why are you drinking? He'll tell you, I want a job. And then the first thing is you want a job, but look at what you're doing. Why are you drinking? They tell you it's because I'm frustrated, I need some money. You want money, but look at what you're doing. So because of the talking, you are missing out on the listening, which is the most important thing. And then through that, you involve people that can handle the situation if you do not know how to handle it.
Great. Let's see if we can find messages if we have, before we close. Good evening. Please include sensitization against alcoholism in universities, colleges, etc. For there's a lot of peer pressure such that even those who don't want to drink alcohol are enticed to begin drinking. It's assumed that if you don't drink beer, then you are down or old-fashioned and that you don't know what you are missing. Any more messages? Hi guys, thank you so much for bringing this topic. I've really learned a lot, and it has changed the way I think and see alcoholism. I would like to support and work with Frank financially, of course, Daniel, on this program. Any other messages?